Hey everybody, Invisiblekatana here, doing a very interesting test. Right now, this may or may not be the next chapter of the Let's Discuss series that I've done on and off, mostly off, from, I think back in 2021 was like the last time I actually did one of these episodes. But right now, I'm driving, which you can probably hear in the background, just the loud noises of my car on the road. So I'll have to work on that as far as the edit is concerned. But I'm using the Rode Wireless Pro, and I was like, man, I've always wanted to do videos in the car. I was going to do it with my GoPro for a long time and try to set that up with the audio, but just things just didn't go the way I wanted them to. It didn't sound as good, and I've always wanted to have wireless microphones so I could do a lot of other different types of silly things. And then I realized this can be how I do it. I could just have the audio recorded. It's like a podcast. You guys are probably looking at some video game footage because that's the only thing I have worth recording. And then, boom, the series returns. So, if the audio for this sounds good, you're going to be listening to an episode of Let's Discuss. And for this one, I actually wanted to do something really simple. Something I've wanted to talk about for a long time because I definitely think it has the potential to work, which is what Resident Evil should have for its online component, which is Mercenaries mode. Capcom should do a permanent mode that is just online Mercenaries mode. Every single game that comes out should have Mercenaries attached to it. It can be the permanent online component. It can be its own download thing. That's what they do with the online games anyway. It's not like a mode that is not even in the menu for the games, whether it was RE3 didn't have it for Resistance. I didn't even bother trying for Village with RE-verse because even the game sucked so bad that they couldn't even put it out on time. It came out a year later and nobody wanted it to begin with, so whatever. So I didn't even try with that, but I know it was its own separate download. So Mercenaries mode would be its own download, and it could already work because the two examples I have, they've already proven they can do exactly what I want them to do because they've done it with the old engine and they've done it in the new engine with RE-verse. So in the old engine, specifically in Resident Evil Revelations 2, they had raid mode. In raid mode, the levels that they use, I'm pretty sure they were mostly from RE6. I didn't really play enough of raid mode to like go through all the levels and stuff, but I know from the very beginning it was like, hey, here's a bunch of RE6 levels because the game was so effing huge. It was like, we might as well reuse some of these assets. So a lot of the levels were like mostly from Chris's campaign from, like I said, didn't really go through it, so it was probably like the couple of levels I actually played. Some were from, or they were, the RE6 levels were from Chris's campaign. And there may have been one that was like the very beginning of Jake and Sherry's campaign. And they showed that they can just put the levels from the engines. They weren't even the Mercenaries levels from RE6 when it actually came out. They were just levels from the game that they kind of, repurposed to put into raid mode. So they've already shown back then that they were willing to do that, where it's like, hey, what if we combine games because they're all on the same engine? We'll just toss them together, have some extra levels, and boom, here you go, raid mode. And then, unfortunately, they used the second example with RE-verse, but in RE-verse, it was like, hey, RPD, because everything's on the RE engine now. So boom, you have a Resident Evil 2 level because you're in the RPD. They had the Village from RE8. I'm sure they had other stuff that I've never seen because I never cared about that game. But they prove they still think about it. Like, hey, we can still use games that are already in our engine and make levels and just throw everything together. All the different games can be thrown together. And that's what they need to do for Mercenaries. Just make it an online component, and it gets updated with every new game that's on the engine. And of course, eventually, if they decide to switch to yet another engine, which probably wouldn't be for, well, I don't know. 7 came out a while ago now that I think about it. So we might only have like 2 or 3 more games, in all honesty. But even then, that's still a decent chunk of time, especially if they decide, hey, if we do this, they can still go backwards and pick up all the stuff that they had from like RE2 and RE3 and use assets from that. So that's what I think Mercenaries mode should be. Permanent Mercenaries mode, and it updates with every single game. Every game, and I think it should be treated with multiple modes within Mercenaries. So raid mode should definitely come back. I think the main thing should just be called Mercenaries because Mercenaries is more popular. There are a lot of people that I don't think even understand what raid mode is or even know what raid mode is because admittedly a lot of people didn't exactly play the Revelations games, and it's only Revelations 2. Well, no. See, I can't even remember. It's been so long since I played the first one. I think raid mode was introduced in the first Revelations, but they really picked it up, and I know people love raid mode for Revelations too. So They should have both of those. Just call it Mercenaries is the main thing because it's just more popular name-wise. So just call it Mercenaries. But when you go to it, you have Mercenaries mode, Raid mode, and then in Mercenaries mode, you still get to pick. Do you do Classic Mercenaries? And I don't mean RE3 Classic, I mean RE4 Classic. I would love for them to do like an RE3 style Mercenaries mode, but I don't think that's ever coming back, sadly. But you could do it like RE4 and 5, how they used to be, and how, you know, the RE4 remake currently is, where it's, you know, time trials. You go through how many points can you get after a certain amount of time, and then the other mode is RE6 mode, because RE6 was just a straight survival version, and I think that's the best version of Mercenaries mode we've ever had. Like, once they switched it to survival, I was like, oh, I like this way more. Like, I love the idea of being like, oh, you know, you're on a time limit, and I think for RE4 the limit is 150 enemies, if I'm not mistaken. At least, you know, for the current one, I don't remember if it's the same number in OG RE4, but it's like, you know, you beat 150 enemies and that's it. You know, you can, if you chain that together, that's the highest score you can possibly have, is getting, you know, a chain together and killing all the enemies at once. But with 6, it's just straight up survival mode. You just go and go and go. And if I remember right, they even added in, kind of like with raid mode, some enemies were even larger as you went, you know, along the path. It was like, okay, we're just going to start flooding you with enemies. And I'm pretty sure I remember some of the enemies actually being larger as it went along, so that they were tougher versions of the enemies as well. And they should definitely do that too. Like I said, that was my favorite version. And of course, both versions should have co-op. You can have survival single player, survival co-op. You know, like I said, I'm just considering it Classic Mercenaries mode, where it's the timed version, and you can have Classic Mercenaries mode timed, and you can have Classic Mercenaries mode in co-op. I would love to do that, because that's technically the only version we don't have. We have Mercenaries by yourself. We have RE6 version where it's survival mode, single player, or co-op. So the only thing we're missing is Classic Mercenaries mode with co-op added to it. And I would love that. I think everybody would love that. So that's my proposal for Capcom. That's definitely what they should do, since much like Sony, where they're just like, hey, we need live service for some odd reason, Capcom is just like, we need an online thing, and yet somehow they just didn't do Mercenaries. It's super weird. I like RE Resistance, Resistance. You know, I actually thought that was entertaining, but it's very hard to do an asymmetric game, and it was definitely the classic situation. I played it, I enjoyed it, and then I left for like 3 months, and when I came back, everybody was dripped out in gold, and if you play a mastermind, you're just losing. It was the same as the Evil Dead game. Like, I left for like 2 months, and I came back like, I want to play this game again. And I was like, oh, it kind of sucks to play this game because I can't do anything because everybody's like, you know, maxed out. So it's a little tough. It's unfortunate. You know, you just it has to really have a huge fan base behind it. So it's unfortunate for Resistance that it didn't pan out the way that it could have, because I actually enjoyed that one. And then, like I said, you know, Reverse, I just didn't even bother with that. Like, it just didn't even look good. It was just like, even for a competitive thing, it just seemed off. It just seemed off. So I don't know why they won't do Mercenaries, but hopefully, if they decide that they're even gonna go back to doing some online component, that's what they can do. Just do Mercenaries mode. You know, Outbreak should be its own thing. I don't think that should be like an online component. That needs to be its own thing. Bring back Outbreak and Outbreak 2. So just do that totally separate as their own official remakes, or just bring them back. I mean, hey, if they just want to like be like, hey, here you go, we barely even updated the graphics, but we added online, I'd be happy with that, because I would love to play Outbreak. Those are kind of my missing pieces when it comes to Resident Evil. I played like the first one for like a little bit, and that was it, and I never like really beat the game, and I never played Outbreak 2. So if they just brought them back and threw online in there, I'd be like, you know what, that's totally fine with me. Maybe GOG can get on that, because they just put out Dino Crisis. I'm very excited. I'm definitely going to be picking those two up. Dino Crisis 1 and 2, for anyone that didn't know, that is currently on GOG, and it's in like 60 frames per second and 4K, stuff like that, or maybe 1080p. I believe I heard it was in like 4K 60, basically, like insanely upscaled. So that's super cool. Dino Crisis, in a sense, is back. Still not from Capcom, but it's out there, upgraded. Maybe Capcom will do it at some point. But they're going to make some new stuff. And if they decide, man, we really just have to figure out this permanent online component because they want extra money, or I'm sure because of extra money, they would probably do microtransactions. So I guess, you know, just throw in the extra costumes. There are a million costumes in Resident Evil, so They could do that. Obviously, some of them would have to be automatically in there as far as extra loadouts, because it would be just like RE4, where you have, it's, you know, Leon from RE4, and then you have Leon in the suit from RE4, but it's a different loadout. You have Ada in her costume from RE4, then you have Ada in her dress from RE4, and it's a different, different loadout with a different costume. And they could totally do that. Every game that comes out, you add like 3 or 4 levels. You know, it just depends on, of course, what characters are actually playable in the game. But you add 3 or 4 characters, and then you can even do alternate costumes for those games that are unlockable. And I think the way they should do it is every update should still be tied to the game. And I think they changed that with RE4, where you could just jump right into Mercenaries. I could be wrong about that as far as the remake is concerned. I don't really remember. It was RE4. I was just playing. I was like, hey, I beat it, Mercenaries mode, whatever. So I don't remember if it was there from the beginning. I believe this was the first time it was, but I could be wrong. But either way, I think it should still count as an unlockable. So you'll have the online component, and then say they make this with RE9. They do it with RE9 if that's the very next game that comes out. Mercenaries mode is the online component. It's whoever's in that game, whatever levels they make for that game. And then they could go backwards and then just throw all the RE4 levels into this online component. All the characters would be there as well, but you still have to unlock it. So if you go through, you have to beat RE9 to unlock the Mercenaries mode online component. You still have to use it like as an unlockable. You unlock the levels, you unlock the characters, and that's where it might change a little, where the duo versions, where it's like, hey, you know, Leon in this costume versus Leon in this costume, it would be a little bit different going forward, because like I said, they'd probably try to hit us with the microtransaction. So maybe you get one unlockable, and then it's like, hey, if you want to pay for this other costume, it'll be this much money, and this alternate costume still from this game will give you this alternate loadout. I'd hate that, but they'd probably do it in some way. They're going to try to make money in some way, shape, or form through costumes or microtransactions. So that's how it's going to be. I don't know if they would even do it with brand new costumes. I think it would just be old stuff that they already have. It would be super easy for them to do that because it's already in the engine. But that's probably how they would do it as far as the microtransaction. So that would kind of suck. But if it's consistently updated with every game, you still get at least 3 or 4 characters, 3 or 4 maps per new game that's added to the Mercenaries mode. And I honestly think that's the way that they should do it. They already did Mercenaries as its own game on the 3DS back in the day, and it was like, hey, Mercenaries mode is really cool, people love Mercenaries. What if we just made it Mercenaries mode on the 3DS? I don't know how well that game sold, but I know it's the thing that they chose to do. So clearly it must have done something, and I think that's the route that they should take if they're gonna go back to sticking with the online component. Who knows if they'll ever do that again because of how it felt 2 separate times. But the fact that they went with RE-verse in general is insane to me. Like, Resistance, I was like, okay, I can see it. And then RE-verse, it was just like, you guys got feedback so early, and then they still delayed the game because it wasn't ready at launch, and they still were like, oh, it'll come out next year. I was like, you really should have scrapped that. There are games that have been scrapped that I wish I could have played, and then somehow RE-verse still made it through a year late, and they were still like, yeah, we're gonna put development into that. I don't understand why, but that is the choice that they made. So if they're gonna go with it again, obviously they didn't do anything as far as RE4 is concerned, but we'll see what happens. That was the last one. Before that, it was RE8 and it was RE-verse. So it might not be 100% out of the realm of possibility that they're still thinking like, hey, what should we do for an online component? They might be over it, they might not be over it, but I think Mercenaries mode should definitely be should definitely be a permanent fixture as far as the online component is concerned. You throw everything in the engine all together, remake stuff from RE8. I mean, heck, I never played this, so once again, the RE-verse stuff, those levels might be better to use versus the RE8 Mercenaries levels, because those things were effing huge. I don't think they should put that mode back in, with the different modes where it's like, RE4 and 5 Mercenaries, and then like the survival Mercenaries from 6. I think that's it. I don't think they need to put in the weird version that they had for RE8. And it could have been fun. The thing about that, I love the upgrades. I just hate the fact that you have to be in a certain area for the enemies to spawn. I think we all think that was the dumbest part of that. Everything else was pretty great. So the random upgrades and stuff like that, they could find a way to throw that in. maybe just make it a modifier, or you could just choose like, hey, do you want power-ups and stuff? So it would be interesting. I don't know how you really do that because of the way it's set. It's totally different in that version because you're actually going through a set of stages as like one solid piece, versus every time you play a run in regular Mercenaries mode, it's just solo. Like it's like starting fresh all over again. So I'm not even entirely sure how you would implement that unless you started to throw those little upgrades and stuff into raid mode, and then that continues on. So every mission and stuff, or every couple of missions maybe, it's like, hey, you found one of the upgrades that they have just like in RE8. So maybe that's how they could implement that, because that was definitely the best part of that version of Mercenaries. But I don't know if you could really do that. Or maybe they could do it. Just keep the levels the same and just change it where it's like, all right, if you do the RE8 version of Mercenaries mode, all the levels are combined together, and then they add in the power-ups and stuff, and then you could do it like, okay, this was my run for all 5 of these levels from this game. Or maybe you could pick each level. That would actually be kind of sick. So maybe they could still find a way to do that. So classic Mercenaries, RE4, RE5 style, survival Mercenaries, RE6 style, and then you pick, if I can remember right, RE8 was 5 levels. And so you could, from all the levels that you have, you pick 5 levels, and it wouldn't be roguelike because you're kind of picking it yourself, I guess. But you pick each level yourself. So you pick 5 levels in a row, and then it's like, this is your set run. So you could still do it. They could still add that as another mode. So you can have 4 modes in there. Can't believe I figured that out. I always thought that it wouldn't work, but now that I'm saying it out loud, I'm like, if they put the work into it, they could totally do that. You just pick the levels yourself, and then that's your run. So I think that could work as well. So classic Mercenaries, survival Mercenaries, RE8 mercenary mode, where you actually pick the 5 levels in order, and then you get a set chapter run, pretty much how you would do it, and then you add raid mode in, of course. That might actually be the hardest one to do, because raid mode was like all these different missions, and I think in Revelations 2, aren't there like over 100 levels or something crazy like that? So that one might be the hardest one to actually implement. But Mercenaries mode, that is what we should have as the online component. Laid it out. I would love to know your thoughts on this. I'm almost at work now, so it's the perfect ending, having figured out that last little piece for RE8. But I would love to know your thoughts on a permanent Mercenaries mode where they just implement everything that's within the RE engine. Because we could have levels come back from RE7, put us back in the basement. That wasn't a Mercenaries mode, but that I thought was actually a unique thing as well, where you like unlock the different chunks of the level. But throw some new stuff in there from RE7, redo some of the levels and components from RE8, throw in some stuff from RE2, throw in some levels from RE3, RE4, and then we're good to go. And then whatever new game comes out, if Code Veronica is in there, you throw in, you got multiple versions of Claire, multiple versions of Chris. It just works. Not to quote Todd Howard, but it just works. And it really would. My personal opinion, of course. But I would love to know your thoughts on a permanent Mercenaries mode. What would you guys do if you had to add an online component to Resident Evil? I think Mercenaries is the only real answer. And honestly, I think every version of Mercenaries is the perfect way to do it. When they switch engines, obviously it would kind of reset. But as of now, you got multiple games. Like I said, they've already proven it with RE-Verse. They already did it with Raid, with the last engine, Raid mode in the last engine. So they stick with that idea. They just do it in the worst way, because they should just stick with it and be like, oh, we'll just throw everything together. Boom. Do it in Mercenaries mode. Give us all the characters, give us all the locations, make new locations. I mean, heck, the RE3 stuff with Resistance, most of those levels were just like brand new sections they just made up. So they could easily do that. That would be really cool. But that's my thoughts. So I would love to know what you guys think about it. This being if this audio even sounds good, you'll definitely hear this episode. But hope you guys enjoyed it, if you even hear it at all. Please let me know what you guys think of as far as a permanent Mercenaries mode, or in general, what they should do, or should they just not even bother? I think they should, because I think Mercenaries should be in every Resident Evil going forward, forever, personally. And that's why I think the online thing works. But we'd love to know your thoughts on it. So please put your comments down in the comment section below. And of course, thanks for watching.